last year, I learned 3 things. 1. Even experienced drivers make mistakes. 2. You don't need a zombie to have a horrifying incident. And 3. Never ignore your check engine light. It happened on a perfectly uneventful evening. I was driving my car, a mini Toyota, down the road to get groceries and other essentials. I live in the outskirts of town, less trouble. It was a very chilly evening. I was about 1.5 miles away from town and my engine was blowing hot. I ignored it. It always did that. I pulled over to refuel at a gas station and even got a beer. There was an auto repairs man next to the station who offered to check my engine, but I blew him off, convinced it could still power through and get the job done. It was a mistake that almost cost me my life. Soon, I was almost driving into town. The entrance had a narrow road. There was no pavement, and to both left and right you initially had wild wood, untamed trees that gradually transformed into a civilized road with roundabouts and intersections as you drove in. The route was also filled with sharp bends, but I had been passing the same old way for years now and was very confident I had mastered the route by now. The rain had been beating down hard earlier. I couldn't wait to get my groceries and go home. About half a mile inside town, the road at this point bended to the right and rose in a short hill. And parked less than 10 feet from the route I was taking was a broken truck on the road. It was not really a big deal, but at this point the only road space not occupied by the truck was less than 20 feet wide. There was no traffic. It was a silent night, and so to get through, I crossed the central white line into the other lane. As I swerved to avoid the broken down truck, I saw 2 cyclists approaching, riding side by side and coming very, very close to where my car was. I could see the realization dawning too late on the outer cyclist's face. I was going to hit the 2 of them. To avoid that, I turned my car sharply round to avoid the collision, but in doing so, my car began to skid inward. I tried to correct the skid, but suddenly the engine, which had been boiling long ago, finally ceased working. The car spluttered relentlessly while still skidding, and I was forced to remain there utterly helpless, unable to do anything. The car careened on crazily and headed to the parked truck while I sat there screaming in terror, unable to do anything, not even to lift a finger. I couldn't do anything to save myself. I was sure I was going to die from hitting the truck head on, but as luck would have it, I only ended up bashing the side of the truck. I had 2 broken ribs, a concussion, an utterly wrecked car, and 2 irate but relieved cyclists on my neck. I spent some time in the ER, the courthouse, and the car repair shop. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks and had physical therapy for 3 months. Finally, after an eternity, the entire process was over and I could move on with my life like it never happened. But the feeling of being trapped in the car, utterly helpless, unable to do or influence anything as my life flashed right before my eyes, never went away. That was undoubtedly the most horrifying experience I've ever had in my life. I loved my Mustang GT. It was the best car I'd ever owned. It was fast, sleek, and had an engine that sounded like a horse and a battleship at the same time. It was everything I dreamed of and more. I drove up and down my hometown that summer. The car was built for speed. So when one of my friends came up with a brilliant idea to go racing, well, I was racing to go. I was all in. We had a little plan to create our little car racing club down at the place where I grew up. We had ravine roads up in the hills of our town where people rarely went to and was wide enough to accommodate 2 cars, though just barely. Although it was a dangerous endeavor that would turn out to be fatal, for us it seemed fun. All 7 of us then decided we would bring our cars out to the hills, go all out during the holidays, and deceive ourselves into thinking we were professional sports car racers for a short while. That was the plan. It turned out to be one of the worst experiences in my life. But in my mind, then it was a fun plan, and I loved it, until the worst imaginable thing happened. One of us died. His name was Ron. He was a good friend, a core member of our racing club, and we were all stunned when we heard the news. He didn't die from cars, however. It was a freak demise, electrocution. Even so, the shock of his death set us straight enough that throughout the summer, the racing idea never came up. Over time, however, the awfulness wore off, and when we resumed talks of racing, this time with even more daring ideas, this was the best way to remember him, we thought. Later that summer, I began the club with my friends. We had planned this time to go all the way and experience the whole cliff ride. We had a mock contest, and I came out second out of 6. It was the most thrilling contest in my life, and on the second day, I decided that I was going to come first. Nothing could go wrong, I thought. That night, I had the dream. It was a dream, a very strange one that later came to stun me into silence, though I never knew it then. I dreamt I was racing with my friends and winning. I was facing the trickiest section of the ravine just around the sharpest bend of the track road. It was a sharp left turn that required maximum balancing and the finest application of steering and brakes to get through. It was rather dangerous, but we could handle it, or so we thought. In that dream, I tried to keep my car on the road when suddenly I lost control and began skidding. I dreamt I crashed into the other car I was racing with. I woke up just before the hit occurred, and one strange thing. The car I was about to crash into belonged to Ron, who was dead. I woke up scared but shook it off. It was a dream, I thought. It doesn't matter. It doesn't count. I was about to go for the scheduled race the next day, shaken but still pumped, when an unexpected problem occurred. My car refused to start. I checked out the transmission, engine, fuel pump, everything and anything, but the car refused to go. I was irritated but forced to sit out. I called my friends to let them know what was going on and told them to carry on without me. I was totally annoyed at my once awesome car. I called the mechanic who checked it out. There was nothing wrong with it. He was as stumped as I was. That period was the most annoying in my entire life, but the next turned out to be completely horrifying. After an uneventful day at the mechanic, I headed into town and called one of my friends to inquire how things were going. What he told me next froze the blood in my veins. Apparently, a new driver joined us. He had a Porsche, the exact same model Ron had. He replaced me in the race. And apparently, when swinging by the same bend of the ravine track in my dream, he lost control and crashed heavily into another car. It was bad. He was not expected to walk again. I hung up that call covered in goosebumps. That was the most horrifying experience I'd ever had in my life. I never went racing again. None of us did ever since. I hate driving at night. Initially, there was really no logic or reason to it, but after what happened last year, February, I had come to hate late night driving even more. It happened on a Tuesday. I was on the wheels going to visit my aunt in the country for a mundane event, a wedding or something. Normally, I'd have left my state long in the afternoon, but I was tied down with work, so I set out late. It was spring, and while the nights were slightly chilly, road conditions were good. I had everything going on well for me, and despite the delay, I believed I could make it in good time. So I set out hoping to get straight to my aunt's place by morning and end my dread for late night driving. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone, I thought. It all started very good. My car, a not-so-well-maintained Hyundai Sonata, was giving me none of its usual troubles, and everything was all smooth sailing. There was not much traffic, so I went faster than I usually did. There were no sharp bends or curves requiring careful navigation either, so in my mind, I was safe. I was so safe, I decided to take a quick shortcut despite the numerous warning bells screaming "no" in my mind. But when I popped right back out and joined the interstate safe, I was feeling unmistakably invincible. I started going faster. I was going much faster than I usually did. So, when I hit my first flat tire at a particularly deserted stretch of road surrounded by wild wood, I sighed, thinking I knew I should have seen it coming. Oh no, I thought. I got down and tried to change the tire, and there, just for a second, my old fear came back. I trembled for a while, but I got hold of myself and went over to the boot of the car to get the spare tire and the jack. It was in the middle of changing the busted tire when I heard it. It was a long howl, some weird animal sound from a creature I couldn't identify. A wolf, maybe. To this day, I do not know. I was just in the middle of removing the burst tire when my instinct told me to look to the side where the bushes lay. Some creature with red eyes was out there, and it was bounding at unimaginable speed towards me. I was totally terrified. I ran into the car and shut the door. My palms were clammy, my heart rate was off the charts. I could hear 1,000 things in that moment. A few moments later, something hit my car with a loud thump. I could hear the beast rustle outside, but try as I might, I could not determine what it was. Heck, I could barely even see it. It avoided the headlights while hitting my car repeatedly. Thump, thump, thump. It, whatever it was, camped outside my car for what seemed like hours on end. I could barely move. My phones had no signal. I was out of the cell tower's range. No car seemed to pass throughout that moment. It was a horrifying period that seemed to stretch till eternity. Every time I thought I was free and the creature had left, I heard some rustling, a howl, or a thump. I couldn't wait for morning to come. When dawn finally arrived, I felt like the survivor of an apocalypse. When I finally got down to inspect my car, I saw not much damage. My car was relatively untouched. Further out, though, I saw a horrific scene. Laying less than 5 feet from my car was the carcass of at least 5 different animals. It was a truly gruesome scene. Torn belly exposed, old blood congealed all around the corpses. A passerby who stopped to help me with the tire called it the work of a mountain lion. Another thought it was a wolf. Whatever it was, I had no idea, and luckily, I never found out. That night was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had in my entire life.